Hi everyone, Farmington Mayor Nate Duckett. Thank you for joining us on the Mayor's Table. Today we have a historian, an elected official, a local business owner, a public servant here to the city of Farmington and abroad. We have Tom Taylor with us. This will be the first of a few episodes with Tom, so we're excited to bring him in today. We hope you enjoy the show and take a little piece of Farmington's history with you. Hi everyone, Farmington Mayor Nate Duckett. Thank you for joining us for a very special edition of the Mayor's Table. It's a normal Mayor's Table, but we have a very special guest with us today. Tom Taylor, extraordinaire. That's what I'm going to call you, extraordinaire. 32 years as an elected official representing the people of Farmington in both here local government for the city of Farmington and also in Santa Fe as our state rep for 16 of those 32 years. Getting you on the show has been like one of my big goals. How do we make this right? Because you have such an amazing memory and knack for recalling information that really makes me jealous at times because you'll come up with things. But anyways, Tom Taylor, thank you for joining us.
Well, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
I could be your hype man.
Yeah, you could.
I just show up and just talk about Tom. Well, Tom, you were the mayor when I was in high school, so that's always something that's been very special to me. As a member of the Farmington High School Student Senate, getting to spend a day at City Hall. And you got to welcome all of us, and then I think I spent the day with the fire department out at the airport, driving up and down the runways. You know, we've been trying to get that program back, but that was a really cool program.
It was a great program. I look forward to it every year.
Did you start that program?
You know, I can't remember if I started it or not. I think it was already in place. But it was kind of fun. Kids ran for president of the student council because that day they got to be the mayor and drive the Porsche. So
that's why Thomas Hawkins was so excited about being the student body president.
That's why Thomas Hawkins was excited about it. Yeah.
I'd love to ride in that Porsche.
It was great
fun. I riding one of the Porsches once. I tripped a window rock that day.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Well, look, I thought bringing you on the show and just kind of talking about your history here and the things that happen underneath your watch, so to speak, and shed some light on things like our utility services and how the community grew. But your family's been in San Juan County for a very long time.
Yep.
I mean, it was one of the original traders. Is that correct?
Yeah, my father's side of the family came in the late 1880s.
Okay.
Into the area. On my mom's side, 1905.
That is a long time.
It's a long time.
Well, I think, we had a conversation the other day and just looking at 4 years as a city councilor, starting in 1980. I was 3. So 80 to 84 on the council, and then you took a break and you ran for mayor in 1986, and you were mayor until 1998. And then in the state house, you were there from 98 to 2014.
Right.
And were forced out of that because it didn't want to leave, as I understand it.
Well, you know, it's time.
Yeah.
I mean, 32 years in public office is really enough. I thought, gee, I only got to play golf like 4 times a year, and I thought if I retired, I could play 6, So it didn't work out.
We still have a tea time set up out there at Pinion Hills. We got to go.
Yeah, we got to go do that.
Needs to get a little bit warmer out, I think.
Yeah.
First. But speaking of Pinion Hills, I mean, Pinion Hills was one of those projects that took shape underneath your leadership, which is, I mean, it's just amazing. I have to think that having brought that to fruition, and then now being able to see on the backside, but certainly 30 years into its existence, all the accolades that have come along with that course.
Yeah.
I mean, tell us about that.
Well, that was an interesting project. We tried a bond issue on a swimming pool. That failed a couple of times. Trying to get a lot of parks work done was really difficult. We ended up putting together a citizens group that were focused on riverine development, soccer fields, the swimming pool. What am I forgetting? Soccer,
baseball.
It was just soccer, swimming, golf, and the riverine.
Okay.
Those four. And so we figured if we added soccer in there, that automatically gives us 1,600 parents, 3,200 grandparents
Yeah.
that are going to vote for it. Standing on their own, it didn't work very well, and so it was a really interesting process we used. We passed a 0.25% gross receipts tax that would sunset in 5 years. And
What year was that?
oh gosh, that was right off. 86 was when that all started. And then of course we passed a subsequent one later that was tennis courts, more of the riverine stuff, other additions that went along with it. Anyway, so it worked out great. We couldn't spend the money any faster than we made it, so there was no forward borrowing or anything like that. Designed those projects and got them done. And
So we're talking the aquatic center,
yeah,
the golf course, the soccer complex, and then some river trail. You know what part of the river trail that was? Was it
well, that was the
right off of Scott?
That was really early.
Okay.
That was the Berg Park section
Okay.
of the trail. I mean, when you look at it now, it's really hard to believe how much has happened down there. I mean, it's truly a fabulous thing to be able to show up the confluence and walk all the way to the animal shelter.
Yeah.
And back on a different route, most of it, it really has turned out well. It's always interesting how early communities in the West tend to industrialize their rivers.
It is awkward.
It's the strangest,
But you see it everywhere.
counterintuitive,
Let's give the oil field all this beautiful, lush land that should be, could be used for public use. And now, of course, you started it. You just talked about having to go in and retrofit.
Yeah.
And how much more expensive it is to go in and retrofit after the fact.
When I was first elected, we had 6 councilors because it was in that election that it changed from councilors being elected at large to being elected from a district. And
Okay.
so it took 2 years to bring that in, and so we had 6 councilors at the time. And that was a priority of one of the councilors was the riverine development. Of course, all of us jumped in on that because it's something that just is a great asset in communities, and so many of those around the country are so beautiful. And it's been a tremendous success. I'm there a lot, and there's a lot of people on the river. It's great. It's a great place to go walk.
It's beautiful all year round.
It
too.
really is.
That's one of the things that I find so neat is to be on there in the wintertime, especially if it's been frosty out, and just to see everything kind of iced, and it's just beautiful. And it ties in great with the animal shelter that, of course, is there. So now you can walk all those dogs all over the river.
Yeah.
So, but Pinion Hills Golf Course, that came out of that 0.25%.
It did.
What was the total expense for Pinion Hills?
We built the golf course for $4.2 million. It was, if I remember right, that's the clubhouse and the whole 9 yards, including the reservoir and the watering system that you had to replace. And
What's amazing, but think how long that lasted.
it did.
That
It
$4
seemed
million
like, grief, it's new. Why are they redoing this thing? But
that $4 million investment lasted from it finished in 88 to 2022, essentially. That's when we started the project.
yeah.
So that's an extensive.
Yet it was a fun project. What we did is we asked our local architects to team with golf course designers and do basically a competition. And so that's how it worked. Everybody submitted their dream, and we made the selection. Ended up with a gentleman by the name of Ken Dye, no relation to the other Dye that's the golfer, but he's done a lot of courses around.
Paco Ridge is one of his courses.
Paco Ridge, Santa Fe, the main course there is designed by him. And it's interesting when you play those, you can feel his presence in them, because there's some wicked stuff that he does in areas that really set it apart. Anyway, it was great. Jack Nicklaus has played it a couple of times.
Really? I
Yeah.
didn't realize that.
Yeah,
It gets a lot of fanfare, and
it does.
This newest, this complete renovation we just did. I mean, it was $10 million that we just think about that. $4 million to build it from scratch.
Yeah.
$10 million to go in and put all brand new irrigation, new cart paths, new bunker sand,
Yeah.
remodel the clubhouse and the restaurant, and
Yeah, this is above and beyond what we were able to accomplish at that time, which is great. I saw it halfway finished. I can't wait to go and see the thing done. This winter has gone on a little longer than expected.
it really has. It just
But,
won't stop.
But the cost relationships, I mean, we're looking at a piece of Highway 64 that's coming in at $9 million a mile.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, the numbers today just don't really mean anything compared to back then.
I guess I should have mentioned that fact too, is that you're still actually in service to our area because you're our state highway commissioner.
I am.
Representative. You're never going to get too far away from
It's
this.
just,
There's
it's
too much
hard.
knowledge in that brain.
It's exciting in those things because I love the learning. In the legislature, we funded the highway department. You know a little bit about them, but you don't drive down the highway all the time going, oh man, that needs some attention and this sort of thing. Plus the whole mechanism inside that department of how it operates. And, people take a lot of that for granted, and it's not easy. Our District 5, one of the 6, 5,700 lane miles.
Wow.
And there are not very many people. There's Santa Fe and Farmington, Espanola, and a few smaller communities in there, and that's it. So there's a lot of country.
I think that's a really good point for folks to understand, is it's a lot of miles with not a lot of people on it. So the
Right.
funding component, I mean, they're moving the funding where the people are at. Right? I mean, that's why the majority of the funding ends up in that corridor, in the I-25 corridor, so to
Yeah.
speak. I don't know if you've driven 550 recently, but my goodness, the winters. We saw how winter played out on our main street in potholes, but 550 is certainly seen it
Water
as well.
expands when it freezes.
That's what I've heard. I've seen those. I have a refrigerator in my garage that in the wintertime, it doesn't, I turn it off and it still freezes everything inside of there. So there's times I'll go in and, oh, gosh, I knew I should have pulled that out. The eggs are frozen.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's, I think if I read off for you, I wanted to say we've fixed 3,000 potholes in the last 2 weeks.
Wow.
We did 1,287 in one day. So but that's what happens here in the high desert. I mean, one of the issues we face, of course, is the
We have
below
4
freezing
seasons.
nights and then the 40-degree days. There's just this huge variance that causes those problems.
It really does. It's
Can I ask you this question in regards to roads? Because I've discovered that roads, as an elected official here, is the number one most talked about topic between community members and elected officials. Was it the same during your tenure? What was the hot topic when you were mayor?
probably so, and it's because that's how we get around.
Yeah.
Of course, when I was born here, we didn't have to use turn signals because everybody knew where you were going. But, now, I mean, when you look at traffic counts around the city, it's like, the highest traffic count in Farmington is Pinion Hills and Maine. And it's just unbelievable.
All that traffic coming from, Colorado and Aztec and
I drove to Durango for a meeting one evening and was headed up there right around 5 o'clock. And it was solid traffic going both ways. People, I guess, working in Durango coming to Farmington, and people that are working in Farmington going home to Durango. And I mean,
Sure.
it's amazing.
my daughter's up at Fort Lewis. She has quite a few professors who actually live in Aztec and Farmington that make that commute every day.
Well, I've created a new state. It's called ASUNIMCO.
ASUNIMCO.
Yeah, it's Arizona, Utah, New Mexico, and Colorado. 4 corners. We're all bastard children of the states that we live in. We're hundreds of miles from the population centers. We're our own economic region. We don't have anything to do with Gallup or other parts of Arizona. You know, you have the mountains that block Durango. All of their goods and services come through Albuquerque, except for, I guess, Safeway drives over the pass. But and then, of course, Utah, that entire southeast third of the state is 55,000 people. Third of the landmass of Utah.
So I could get a lot of people behind this idea of us creating our own state, Tom. Tell us, how do we go about this process?
we do. In fact, we had two different organizations that worked for a while. The first was called the San Juan Forum, and it was mainly because all three of the states, not Arizona, have a San Juan County. So we called it the San Juan Forum, and we met on a quarterly basis and talked a lot about cross-border issues. It's extremely important here because we all participate in this, and of course Farmington just happened as a result of 1982 when a mall corporation was looking at Farmington and they went, this is weird, there's a Kmart in Farmington, New Mexico that's in the top 10 grossing Kmarts in the US, and there's only 32,000 people there, and the county, which is the size of Connecticut, has only got, I think it was 60-something thousand at the time. And they couldn't figure that out until they realized that they had to get demographics from 3 other states. It was 17 counties and 26 communities. And it was 250,000 people.
Well, I think that's the part, when I first moved here, which I moved here in 93, to hear, I think it, was it, no, maybe it was in the Outback. When Outback first got built here, which was after 93, it was the #1 Outback in the entire Outback chain.
Yeah.
You know, and I think we've seen the same thing happen. I know that Hastings, when Hastings was here, you know, we were the #1 Hastings store out of 165 stores all across the United States. And there's just something about that's special. It's unique, really.
We used to do surveys in the mall parking lot, and 40% of the plates were local.
Yeah, I've been really impressed lately, the number of plates from a bunch from Texas. There's a bunch of Texas plates here right now.
Anyway, it's good and bad. You know, it's a part of our economy that profits don't stay here, they leave. It's a lot of minimum wage jobs, but along with that, it does bring, you know, responsibility to the city because our police force looks like we're a much larger city than we are.
Sure.
Everything is strained a little bit because of the population that on the, I don't know, what do you have now, 45,000?
45.6, I think, yeah.
But the daytime population is double that.
It absolutely is.
And
on a Friday afternoon, you know, it feels like it's triple or quadruple. Although there's been days here recently that on a Thursday afternoon, I'm looking around going, where is everybody coming from?
Yeah.
But it's been that way for a few months now. I feel like for probably 18 months, we've just seen a steady stream of increased activity in the community, and which is a blessing.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is a blessing. People, you know, and I get less of these comments now, but early on, you know, in my term as mayor, I would get so many people like, what can we do about Main Street? We can't move on Main Street on a Friday afternoon. What do we need to do? And I'm like, you need to be thankful. All those people are spending money in this community. There's no way to expand Main Street at this point, but it is a nice thing to have. I get that it can be a headache at times. I just try and find ways around it.
Well, you know, when we did the downtown project here lately, the group that went in and designed that, when they had a little get together about with a lot of us that were merchants in the downtown area, and they had us go around the room and ask what our vision was for the future, and there were a lot of interesting ideas about that. When it came to me, I said, I just want a parking problem.
That's exactly right.
And that's, you know, the first day I showed up at the gallery and there was no place to park, it was, yes.
Yeah, we were in a, you know, it's interesting you just talk about the 4-state economic region. You know, I go down and I visit my brother in Phoenix, and to go from my brother's house to visit my aunt, you know, it's an hour drive.
Yeah.
And so when you consider those folks making those kind of commutes every day, whether it's from work to home or back and forth, I mean, our short little jaunt, you know, over the state line to Colorado to Durango or Cortez is fairly easy to do.
It is.
And it just opens up so much more possibilities and opportunities for you to explore this area. It's really unique.
Then the other unique thing is that Senate District 1, Bill Scherer's district, 20 years ago was 6% Native American. It's 29.6 today. So we have, lots of Native Americans that have moved into Farmington because of goods and services and that
Sure.
sort of thing. Anyway, it's the point is that I think the state of Azinemco really needs to have concern for all of the communities that are in it. You want Blanding to be as healthy as it possibly can, along with Cortez and other communities in the area. You don't want a bunch of everybody moving into Farmington. You want to sustain that whole area, and and then on top of that, it's great to see a nighttime picture of the United States. There's this big black hole and this little tiny light at the four corners where where we are, and it's just a unique place in the world. 4 hours from 57 national parks and monuments, and I haven't seen them all yet.
No.
I'm still picking up a few here and there. Anyway, it's roads that connect all of those things, and that's why they're extremely important in our lives, because of the way we get around. We don't have a train.
No. Working on that.
Yep, we do.
We're working on planes and trains.
Yep.
And then we're working on non-motorized opportunities. The River Trail expansion, still working off of that original vision, and I think we're getting much closer to seeing that go all the way from what will end up being the Pinion Hills Bridge extension, all the way to the Among the Waters.
Yeah.
You and I have had conversations about kind of the biggest wins maybe that you've had as mayor, and then maybe some of your biggest disappointments. And I know Pinion Hills Bridge comes up frequently in that conversation.
Pinion Hills Bridge. I can't remember what the cost is from Main Street to the other side of the river now. It's
$40 million.
$40
for our
million.
part of it.
Well, it was $4.2 million when we failed to get the job done.
What year was that?
Oh, heck, that was in the late 80s.
Was it late? It was in the 90s.
Maybe it was in the 90s. I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
But $4 million.
It was back when I was a child.
$4 million to $40 million. I mean, that just, every time I think about that, I kind of get queasy about it. I can't comprehend where $40 million goes on 2.5 miles of road and a bridge.
Yeah.
And I mean, you talked just earlier about $9 million per mile to go on US 64. And asphalt is, man, there's a lot of money in asphalt. Asphalt that apparently here in the high desert doesn't seem to last very long because our roads are terrible. Anyways, that's a whole different conversation.
Lot to be said for gravel.
So Pinion Hills Bridge did come before council while you were there.
Oh, yeah.
And it got voted down. Do you remember what the count was on that vote? Was it a 3-2? Was it a 4-1? I guess it wouldn't be 4-1, 3-1.
Well, I don't know if it ever actually came to a vote.
Okay.
We had some legal issues with the taking that we had to do. And
at that time,
that's where I made the mistake, is not going to court and getting the thing done. Yeah. A landowner that we had problem with out there. The right-of-way was like $65,000 at that time, and I think it ended up $1.2 million.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, of course, that's the way the world is right now. It's the same with a fast food restaurant,
Sure.
You go get a hamburger and a Coke now, and you're pushing $15.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually just had lunch today, and I went to Smith's, and I got just a small lunch, and it still ended up being $13. And I'm looking at what I got, and I'm like, really expensive salad.
So speaking of roads, some of the successes that went along. That's the only one I can think of that's was really a major failure that I look back on if I could have. It's kind of like that P-51 Mustang I could have bought for $1,500 when I was in high school.
Today would be worth who knows how much.
Anyway, in when I was 4 years old, or I guess I was 6, in 1954. When the gas line was completed to California, we jumped from 3,500 people to 23,000 in 6 years.
Wow.
The city was just falling all over themselves with new subdivisions going in, Cherry Hills, all of that, out 20th, north of 20th, places like that, growing leaps and bounds. We had this little water system that we still have that all of a sudden had to expand over time to 7 zones. Roads just quickly done. Concrete sewers were put in during that time. So when I was elected mayor, one of the big challenges right off the bat was dealing with water and sewer. The hydrogen sulfide gas breaks down concrete, so a lot of our main sewer lines were half pipes. Concrete bottom with the goodies flowing through there, and then it was rocks and roots just hanging down in from the top side. And so we ended up slip lining 40 miles of sewer.
Wow.
During that time. We paved a lot of subdivisions that had not been touched since they were put down in the 50s. So that was a big project that went on. Pinion Hills Boulevard, to get that connection across the north part. We took that easement out years before anybody was there and decided a limitation on access to it and that sort of thing, so we would have a major artery through the north side. So that's one of the big successes, was the invisible stuff.
I think Pinion Hills is a really big success on that portion of it, because when I left here for college, it wasn't done, and then you come back and you're like, this is fantastic. I mean, this is a dirt road, and now it's fully connected. And what I think is great too is Mike Zines made this comment to me the other day that, no matter whether you take Main or whether you take Pinion, if you go from the east end of town to the west end of town, it still takes the same amount of time. And it's nice to have those options.
Oh, it's a great alternative, and especially when the plants were working, lots of employees from the plants, would use that to avoid having to go through the downtown area. And
did you do any annexing when you were mayor?
Oh yeah, there were several little annexations here and there. Quite a bit of area added to the community. We did paving districts. You haven't done any of those. You've missed the funnest thing in the world, is getting people to pay for the street in front of their house.
We've had one conversation about it pretty in depth for a particular area, and they chose not to do it.
I tell you, they're difficult.
Yeah.
They're very difficult. But the other thing was telecommunications. The San Juan Forum kind of started that. We basically teamed up with Colorado, with Durango, Cortez, and started talking about how are we going to get fiber optics into the Four Corners, because we were basically in the middle of nowhere. That started in, I think, 96.
Okay.
Maybe it was 95. We got Black and Veatch. We raised 50 grand in both states locally, and hired Black and Veatch to do a feasibility study on it. And it's basically running a line from Albuquerque to Grand Junction, which ties us into Denver and the main spurs around.
Sure.
So we would have a redundant system. And then we had a meeting every month for a long time and worked on the project, learned a lot about it, and then one Friday afternoon, a miracle happened. Somebody came into my office with this little piece of cable called optical ground wire, which is the ground wires that run along the very high part of the major transmission lines.
Okay.
You have the conductors that are draped between them, and on top you have the two ground wires that go in place. So the fiber optic is inside of that in a stainless steel tube with the cable around the outside. And anyway, when I learned about that, I wasn't in the middle of nowhere anymore, because we've got transmission lines going all over the western United States.
Sure, right out of here.
So I called Ben Montoya at P&M, and said, "Man, have you heard of this stuff?" I said, "This is great." And anyway, long story short, they were getting ready to spend a lot of money and improve their microwave connection up here. Farmington, by the way, had 6 DS3 receivers. 1,600 long-distance lines were available.
That's it.
Out of the whole county. Anyway, P&M jumped on board. Tri-State Electric jumped on board. They took it over. They did it privately. We didn't have to jump through all of the consultants and grants and all that. It would have taken another 10, 12 years easily. Yeah. Took them 6 months. It was a year and a half to get the right-of-ways perfected and everything. It was 6 months. It went into place, and they went bankrupt about 3 months after it opened, and Tri-State and P&M ended up owning the facility. And, it was just luck that it happened on that particular day. Yeah. There were a lot of those kinds of things. The Navajo Dam hydroelectric plant. We'd been trying to do that while I was on the council. When I was elected mayor, I jumped on it and got an agreement with the Navajos to release that deal so that we could build the hydroelectric plant there. Pin stocks, of course, were in place with the dam, and the turbines were there, so we purchased the turbines from Navajos and, popped that in place. And so that was, up to 30 megawatts at times that is generated by, and that's a flow of the river plant. It's going
to be pretty busy this runoff season.
Well, I hope so. Yeah, it'll be great to have that little bit of extra power.
The hydro plant on Hydro Plant Road, you do know that still operates on occasion?
Actually, it had been abandoned when I was mayor, and I asked why we aren't using it. It's 500 kV. It's tiny. It's such a cool building.
It has wooden ball bearings.
I know. Is that crazy? We spent $25,000 and redid the wicket gates on the thing and put it back into service. And I don't know. So it's still on and off at times.
Yeah, they keep it up. I don't know, for memento's sake.
You got to fire it up
like
and
a museum.
Do tours.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was thinking.
Cool
I didn't even know about that until just a few weeks ago.
I've thought about getting a hold of that thing and putting really cool stained glass and those cool windows that are on there and build a really unique little restaurant in the turbine house.
I like that idea.
Something like that.
That would be really cool.
It's really a neat thing. It's only got 16 feet ahead that comes off the Willett Ditch, which is why the Willett Ditch is there.
500 kV.
Yeah.
But it had been abandoned, basically. The city just stopped using it.
It had been abandoned for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're over there doing a lot of work now. We're working on a substation over there.
Yeah, in fact, back then when I was a kid, the whole Animas plant was brand new. Can't remember when that was built. It was in the 50s sometime.
Yeah.
When the city took over the utility.
Well, and then during your tenure, we also went from one water treatment plant, or was that before you? We went to the second one. It was in the 70s, the second one.
The second one was built while I was on planning and zoning. I was on P&Z from 77 to 80. That's how I got mixed up in this business. I really didn't intend to do that in my life.
What were you doing full time during that time?
Well, I worked at Farmington Lumber and Hardware.
A little lumber yard.
Yeah. Went to school. I studied architecture and engineering, and ended up leaving UNM with a bachelor's, but failed to get my master's degree. Program got all messed up, so I put it to really good use. I don't have any pieces of paper on the wall, but I learned a bunch of stuff, so it's been really handy.
Do they reissue bachelor's? Because they should reissue one so you can put it up in a frame.
Well, I have a Bachelor of University Studies.
Okay. All right.
They changed the architecture program from 5 years to 6. We were supposed to get a BFA, but it required 2 years of language. Our class didn't have it, so they created the Bachelor of University Studies. That's how that happened. Anyway, that was a valuable education for me, running a city. Understanding a little bit about the engineering parts of things and
sure,
and the architecture and planning. You know, a lot of it was planning.
I would love
So
to
it
have had
was-
that
it was a good
an
background.
engineering background to some degree. It would be very handy.
Yeah.
It would get you in a lot more conversations. It'd probably get me in trouble, really. But it's fun now, working with the utilities, and they go in, and when they're doing work, like, we were burying the electric lines on 20th Street. And we're still in the midst of that project. But they got the Sullivan and 20th, and they got into the ground, and there were so many pipes and so much going on, and didn't know, here's one ditch, and
Oh, yeah.
there's so much infrastructure underneath our feet. We have no idea.
The thing you ought to do is go across the street to the planning department and take a look at the aerial photographs of Farmington in 1950. And just look at what was there. 20th Street was a dirt road with a big bridge where the monkey car
Monkey
wash
shines,
thing
yeah.
is. Monkey shine thing
Monkey
is.
wrench.
Yeah.
There's a bridge.
There was a bridge right there because that's a big wash that runs through there. And that's why we have drainage issues right there. We have a big pipe that goes to the river, but
Yeah.
when you look at those old aerial photographs, you see this big old bridge and everything else. It drains a lot of area. You go and develop it and you hide it, but it's still there.
Yeah. I think that's been one of the fun things, is to see how the focus, and I appreciate what you said earlier. We have been very, very good and diligent about making sure that what's underneath the ground is getting the attention that it deserves, because that's clean water, that's sewer, that's storm drain. I mean, when I first came on as council, that's when we just had the big rains in 2012. And so now all around, the north part of town, you have these huge retention ponds. And then you just sit around and wait, like, is it ever going to rain
if I could have
again?
it my way, and if I'd have been mayor 40 years sooner, we would have zoned every arroyo 200 feet wide. You don't use this. These are city parks. And we wouldn't have a drainage problem anywhere.
Yeah.
No dams, none of that stuff, If we'd have just respected that. And of course, Albuquerque's similar,
Sure.
They finally built those huge
Yeah.
arroyos over there, concrete line things, to deal with that problem. But if you just leave the natural ones there, it's expensive, because then you have land that developers would love to use, but it's in a floodplain.
Now we ended up with a house up there in Crestwood that was, clearly built on top of the arroyo. The arroyo, they just, piled dirt, and then 2012 comes and it just starts, washing away people's parts of their backyards.
Yeah.
Where water is a very destructive force. That is
It
something
is.
I've really come to be humbled by. When it rains, I'm paying attention, because
Can't do without it.
no, that's right. We've there must be $15 million worth of infrastructure that has gone on just the north part of Farmington.
Yeah.
And every time it rains hard, I actually take the time to go out and make sure that all those, everywhere we built something, is it working the way that it was
Well,
designed
it's
to
like
work?
where Si Senor's is, the arroyo that crosses Maine.
Yeah.
See, that's an arroyo. We've changed its historical channel and diverted it where we want it, we thought. But when it really gets going, it's going to go its old way.
Yeah.
And man, it's done some horrible damage at times when it gets around those culverts. Then all that sand just
Explodes out of
evaporates,
there.
And yeah.
You just
Those
hope
are the
for-
challenges, trying to figure out how to fix those things, because as we get more and more populated and there's more infrastructure, then those little problems become bigger as time goes on.
You and I have talked one time about kind of reflecting at your service at the state level and reflecting it here at the local level. I mean, looking at it now, which did you have more fun at? What did you maybe was most valuable to you in your life, or where you felt like you were able to do more?
Mayor is the most powerful political position in the United States, president included. And the reason I say that is because power is the ability to do work. So when you have a mayor and a small council like this, you can get things done. You can get a lot of things done. You're close to your electorate, You're not doing things out of the community. You're in here, you're part of it. And you can have a greater effect on your citizens in that position than you can anywhere else. In state, you're so removed from the public. It just, as hard as they design to try and make public a part of that, you can't. That process is so complex. There are so many subjects, 90% of which people don't care a bit about. I mean, if you look at the number of bills that are actually signed and passed during a session and passed unanimously, it'd blow your mind.
Yeah.
It's like, really? You guys do get along at times? And it's really difficult for a citizen to go down to Santa Fe and have any clue about what's going on. We operate on a different time schedule there. We do things in order. The time on the clock is not necessarily important. That did get changed a little bit, which was a major change that I think was great, and fortunately it was done when the Republicans held the House for a while. We used to have early committee meetings, and then we'd go on the floor, and then after the floor session we'd go into the afternoon committees, which would get later and later and later all the time. So citizens who were coming down to speak for a particular bill comes on at 3 o'clock in the morning the next day, you know, eventually. So what they did is they had a session, the morning committees, a quick session from 10 to noon, and then they went to committees, and then they completed the session work later in the evening after that was over, and that fortunately has been retained, and it works much better.
Allows for more public interaction.
Yeah, it gives, at least you have some hope that things might happen when you drive 200 miles and discover it's not going to be heard today.
Yeah. I
And
recall.
even so, you get your 2 minutes to go whatever. It's just a very, very different environment. You know, here you're close to the electorate, even though it's interesting how many people don't know who you are.
Sure.
I was in line at grocery store during one of the elections. I had a write-in candidate running against me, and the two people behind me were having a conversation about me, so I jumped in. I said, oh man, I know the mayor really well. He's crazier than that, believe me. Kind of straightened them out on the issue that they were involved in, and I turned around and the checkout girl's looking at me like this, and I shook my head, don't say anything till I'm gone. I got into those situations a lot.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it.
What has changed the most, you think, for electeds, local electeds, since you were
You know, children.
children?
Yeah. The world we live in. We didn't have social media to put up with. Back then it was hard to learn much. Now you have so much to learn, and how do you know what's true and what isn't? What is totally made up? You know, you've got this, what do you call it, AI stuff,
Yeah.
where we can take this interview and make you and I say whatever you want us to say.
Man, I could be Arnold Schwarzenegger and you could be
That's
Will
true.
Ferrell. Yeah. Technology's, it's wild.
Now, I'll have
Social
to work
media,
on
I
my
think-
accent a bit, but
Social media, I think, has definitely presented a whole new challenge, and you know, there's good and bad with all those things.
there's more people. Our environment has changed. I mean, most of the stuff I did in high school, I'd be in jail today. Most of my teachers would be fired. I mean, it's just a totally different world for people. And, you know, I have my kids, oldest kids are, well, my kids are all in their 40s right now. But their perception of the world is very different from mine.
Really?
Yeah. And you know, it's weird because I always used to talk to my dad about times past, and now I'm old, and I think about the times when I was a kid as being all of a sudden a long time ago, and how different it really was.
I've had this conversation on the radio show with my friend Sean, talking about the generational component of looking at the world we're living in now and going, geez, it's all going to garbage. But every generation has always gone to that point, like, God, things have changed so much. Like, we're all just going to hell in a handbasket. But that's been every generation. It's not a unique component to anyone. Then I don't necessarily feel that way. I certainly think that there's challenges that are new and unique, and I don't know if we're handling them the right way. But what I've appreciated, the local part, and what I really try and emphasize to folks is there's a lot we can control right here.
Yeah.
In your own community, your service to your community, your relationships with your neighbors and your family, all those things are really important to keeping this community going. All that other noise, especially in social media, it's just noise. You can see things that are happening, 1,000 miles from here. That's not here. You got to keep those things in context and value what we have and continue to work on those things so that we can sustain this. Yeah. We had our guys, our sheriff's department deputies who rode across the Atlantic Ocean. I think that's incredible. And I said that to folks, like, we support law enforcement in San Juan County. And you can watch the news and realize that it's not a lot of communities that do. And we need to support each other and understand that we're fallible at times, but let's give some grace, and let's, I think it's important that we stay on that local level.
I've traveled the world pretty much, and the U.S. doesn't really have giant cities. I mean, back when I was a kid, L.A. was big, New York was big, Chicago was big, but after that, there really wasn't much. And truly large metropolitan cities like exist in other parts of the world, we don't really have a concept of what that way of life is like. But as time goes on, it's people moving to the cities.
It's bound to happen. We're still fairly young.
Well, have you seen the nighttime view of the U.S.? When you see that, you realize why the Mountain Time Zone is never talked about.
That's right.
Because there's only 4 lights.
Denver.
in the whole expanse. What is it? 20% of the U.S. population lives west of that, where the line stops on the light, little bit west of the Mississippi River, all the way to California, including all their big cities. There's only 20% of the population of the country.
Sure.
So life here is different. Seattle, Portland, huge homeless problems up there. I mean, I think it's a problem here, but my gosh, the magnitude is so great in those kinds of cities. It's interesting. I don't know if the same thing happens in European cities. Obviously not in Singapore. But it's just fascinating to see the difference because of the population, and of course because of social media and all of that really has changed the fabric of life.
There's a show that I've watched on Netflix. It's totally off, but just thinking about the difference in cultures and cities. And one of the things I've always admired about the Asian countries is for those populations, there's so much pride and respect that when they talk, they give a lot of reverence to their families, and and I'm here because of them. I did well today because my parents had great DNA, and but they give reverence to those things, and there's a lot of pride in the way that they do it. They want to maintain that, and I wish we had more of that within our culture. We're so individualized and focused on ourselves, which has been exacerbated by social media.
Well, you have to realize our culture is so much younger than all those other ones.
A lot of growing pains.
It is. I mean, we live in a very unique place in the world.
To be in that leadership role that we've taken over the last 70 years. I mean, to be in that leadership position at such a young evolution of our society is very unique. Yeah.
Anyway, it's a big challenge.
It's a big topic. We could probably talk on that a long time. Tom, and we're coming up, I think, close to an hour here together today, and I want folks to know that there's going to be multiple episodes where you and I get to sit down and talk. And today we kind of wanted to focus on local government and kind of your experience and history there. Is there other cool components or things that happened during that 12-year stint? Is there any secret passageways in City Hall that I need to know about? Is there a set of keys that you left in the office somewhere?
You took out the tunnels when you remodeled up there. Yeah, Farmington's always been a great place. I was fortunate when I was mayor because I was the kid and I was surrounded by older people. Many of them had been on the council for years. So lots of institutional knowledge from different points of view. It was just a really fascinating experience. I kind of like opposition. When Bill Manchester left as manager, I searched for a new city manager and I picked the one that disagreed with me the most.
Yeah.
Because I wanted another point of view on things, not, yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, we're going to do that. It's like,
sure.
Anyway, and it was interesting. We had a lot of knockdown, drag-out discussions about how to do things, and the result of that is you end up with a much better solution because you've been able to consider both sides.
Sure.
The one thing about elected office that people don't realize that you probably have been enlightened on, maybe you haven't thought about it, but you go through life creating opinions by gathering up those things that you agree with and just basically not paying attention to those that don't. And then all of a sudden you're elected and the lights kind of turn up on all those other points of view and you realize, I've got to consider those now. That's part of this job, especially in state government where you get into all of the social issues and things like that that you don't necessarily have in city government. It's like the death penalty. We fought that for years down there about doing away with the death penalty. And man, the first time I had to vote on that, I was haunted by my dad's advice. Before I went into the legislature, he said, Tom, one piece of advice, make sure that anytime you cast a vote, that you can face anybody anytime and tell them why you voted the way you did with a clear conscience. And that was a haunter.
Yeah.
It's like I realized that a lot of those opinions that I'd created were done very tritely. And so that's the cool thing about elected office is you realize, hey, I've got to take a peek at some of these things because dang near half the population believes differently from me. Important to understand those things.
It is really important to understand that. And that has been, there's been a couple different instances that immediately came to my mind where I was, this is exactly what I thought and this is what I felt. And then, I was fortunate, I surround myself with people that, also disagree with me and was able to get in some good conversations. And I realized that well, you've used the word unique quite a bit, but local government being nonpartisan, I like that. I like that there's not parties involved, left, right, or indifferent. I mean, it's really focused on how can we most efficiently utilize our local tax dollars to provide the services that the people want. Mm-hmm. And of course, we've added in a few things, when it comes to economic development and so forth, but that's really our focus, and that's our drive. Mm-hmm. And it's not based upon your political views on these social issues that really just, in my humbled opinion, they just distract people from what's really going on around them. Right, wrong, or indifferent. They're huge distractions. Yeah. And it's taken us away from, the basic things that are really most important in life, I believe. So I'm glad that part has been left out of local government because we don't need that. We've really got a job to do, just as you said. Yeah. As mayor, you could really get some things done. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that if there's opportunities, people call and they have a concern or something, and it's something you're like, yes, we can fix that. Man, that makes me feel good. Like, yes, we'll get on that right now. And I love those feelings because, at the state level, I send a lot of stuff to our state guys, knowing that I'm sending you a lot of stuff that you're not going to be able to do anything about.
It's such an arduous
thing. You need to know
thing.
what we stand for and who we are. Right now they're trying to dismantle the pyramiding in the gross receipts tax system, which I'm for. We've got to dismantle the gross receipts tax system for future economic growth and attracting businesses and just making it a much fairer tax policy for for business, but there's an expense to local government that's right now is built into that bill. It's going to cost us tax dollars, which means your locals are going to receive less services. There may be less police officers and maybe whatever.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, geez, I don't want to hurt what we're doing here, because this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where people develop their lives, and this is where it's at. The quality of life exists. We need that money. But at the same time, I really want to get rid of that, because the long term is maybe more money will come in because we've gotten rid of the pyramiding component. It will attract more private investment, and therefore we'll recoup that expense. It just may be a little painful. Now, places like Albuquerque, it's going to be immediately painful because they're going to lose tens of millions of dollars right off the bat. And
you know, we have gross receipts. Every other state's got sales tax. I think
Hawaii had it for...
well, Hawaii still has gross receipts, but it's different from ours. And New Hampshire did for a while. The reason gross receipts was invented in the 60s was so that New Mexico could tax the federal government. Mm-hmm. It's a third of the jobs. At the time, it was a full third of the jobs in New Mexico were federal.
Which makes sense in Hawaii as well.
But there was no way to tax the federal government, so the way that was designed, it enabled taxation of the federal government, basically. And anyway, it's an interesting history. But as time has gone on, the problem with it is, you know, when it was 4%, not a big deal. But now, as it's eking up into the 9s, it's a big deal.
Yes.
Especially in the pyramiding. And, you know, and of course, from a business point of view, the other problem is that it's every other time. I mean, you can buy something wholesale without paying tax on it, but the wholesaler who bought from someplace else had to pay it on that portion, and that's where the pyramiding happens. Worst example was the uranium enrichment plant in the southern part of the state. The uranium hexafluoride that they use is a commodity. So while it's sitting in the yard waiting to go through the through the process for a year or whatever, it's trading on the stock market time and time and time again. So, you know, we had to make a special dispensation to exempt them from gross receipts tax, otherwise that wouldn't work at all.
Wow.
It'd be 100% tax or close to it pretty quickly in that situation. And there's so many different things that go on in commerce now that don't fit it. We have exemptions, we have oh, come on.
Well, they've exempted
deductions and exemptions of the gross receipts tax. We don't know about exemptions. When you're exempt, there's no reporting on it, so we don't even know what kind of gross receipts are available through that part of that.
Yeah. We've always talked about needing to lower the rate and broaden the base because so much has been taken out of the tax. Everything's exempt. I mean, there's like 80% of all goods and services.
Bill Scher and I did an interesting process. We looked at the gross receipts collected by the state and the amount of tax, or the gross receipts reported by the state and the amount of tax that was collected. And we realized that the effective rate for the state was 1.7%. Once you take out the exemptions and deductions and the credits, somewhere in there's a whole bunch of money. And so it looked to us like if we did away with all of that stuff in some form or fashion, that you could get it down to 2% because we were already there.
He still talks about the 2%, the flat 2% tax.
Yeah. We couldn't get it past. The biggest problem was there were a lot of people that didn't like it because rich people also got the deduction.
Yeah.
And, you know, I tried to explain rich people really aren't affected too much by the gross receipts tax. They can afford to pay it. It's poor people. It's the only tax that they pay. And that's a 75% reduction in tax. And, you know, we took it off of food, but we took it completely off. And so as a result of that, you know, the cities got hammered on that deal.
Well, the state was paying us for a long time. And
anyway,
they said, well, we don't want to pay you anymore.
Taxation is very complex, and changing it is painful. There's no way that it can be done without serious pain.
The only thing I had mentioned to the committee that's hearing it now, and I can't think who it is, was that we're in a situation right now financially in the state where we could underwrite that at the state level and hold the cities harmless. I'm going to use the harmless term because not put that burden on them. But that's still not a long-term plan. Well, it is. I mean, it could be a step-by-step process, but But it's good that history there is so we can tax.
We really don't have home rule in New Mexico. I mean, Albuquerque does. There's 5 communities in the state that are home rule, but our home rule is not like home rule in Colorado.
Did you ever consider doing that?
In other places, we did. We really couldn't see a financial advantage in doing it.
Yeah, that's kind of
just because of the way state law is designed.
They still had so much control.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy thing, and like I say, it's going through surgery without anesthesia to to change the tax. But it's going to have to be done because it's going to kill us eventually.
Yeah, that trajectory of the economies of Arizona, Colorado, and Utah, post 1950, and they all started going like this, and New Mexico just stayed.
Yeah, we're just creeping along.
Just creeping along. We were the government state.
We really haven't grown in population for the last 20 years.
Yeah, we have a huge, area to cover too. That you think about 2 million people, not a whole lot of tax. We've been fortunate, I think, with oil and gas. It's been a blessing.
Yeah.
But other states like Wyoming are very similar.
I was in Singapore. That island's 25 miles by 9 miles, and there's 6.5 million people living there.
Really? Just shoved in there, living on top of each other.
Believe it, yeah.
Very different when you live out in these wide open spaces.
It is.
You have a different mentality of life.
Your
quality of life, the way you view life is very different.
Yeah.
Which I think is becoming more attractive to folks that have been in those big population centers.
It's always difficult when you visit places to understand what it'd be like to live there. In Singapore, if you get caught stealing something, they kill you.
Yeah. So they cane you right there.
We don't do that very often here.
No.
Yeah.
Well, there may be a need for that. I guess someday, I don't know, because things are getting a lot of control in some of these big cities.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, thanks for joining us for this this first edition of the Tom Taylor Mayor's Table. I think it's been fun, and I look forward to the next conversations. And you're still leading in this community. I've appreciated your support with the downtown renovation, and now we're working on our art plan for the area and the Apple Festival. And you and Bev and Terry, your family, I watched Tennille in the San Juan Symphony the other night. I mean, you're just still so ingrained and doing so much here that's adding value. And thank you for being, the mayor, not just then, but you're still, somebody that I respect you tremendously, and I know most of this community as well.
Well, thank you. I was kind of raised that way.
Yeah.
And I love my community. I've traveled all over the place, and I'd rather live here than any place that I've been. And so there's a reason behind wanting to do that kind of stuff. But anyway, thank you for that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us here on this episode of the Mayor's Table. We appreciate you. And you can go out there. I think Tom's a great example of an individual committed himself to the idea that serving others is such a huge component to making life worth living. And so I just encourage you in that. Find some place here in this town, whether it's it's a neighborhood association, it's a downtown association, it's a civic organization, whatever the case may be. There's somewhere out there where your effort is valued, and I just encourage you to go and find it. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time here on the Mayor's Table.